What we want to do now is make this light flicker like a real candle would. If this was a light bulb, we'd be pretty good. It gives a consistent light. But with a candle, we need it to kind of be flickering to make it feel more realistic. So what I want to do is create a behavior for this point light. And anytime I'm talking about behaviors, I'm talking about coding. We need to write code to tell it how to behave. I'm going to go to my assets in my project window. Inside of scripts, we already have our load scene there. Let's add a new script. I'm going to right click, create C# script, and I'm going to call this one Flicker. You can see over in the inspector that the Flicker base code is right there. We want to open that up with your editor and start writing some code. I think we know what the start method does and the update method does now, and we are going to use both of those, but I don't need the comments anymore. The first thing that you should know is how to access properties of different components for different game objects. This script will be attached to the point light, so that means it's aware of the point light. We know what it's attached to, but we don't know what components are on it. So we need to tell it which components. In this case, inside the start method, I'm going to access a property of the light component that is on the Spotlight game object. I do that using the getComponent method. Now, every method is followed by parentheses, but in this case, we also, before those parentheses, want some angle brackets, because inside of there is where we specify the type of component we're getting. In this case, we are getting the light component from the object that the script is attached to. Now, what are we going to do with that light component? We're trying to mess with one of the properties. We're going to say dot and the name of the property. If I go dot intensity, I am accessing or getting that value. Let me make sure the point light is selected over in the inspector and bring that code back up. So what we're saying here is that we are getting this light component from this game object, or whichever game object the script is attached to, and we will be attaching that Flicker script to this object. So that's how we get access to the component, and then using the dot notation, we can get access to any of the properties. Notice I used a lowercase I here, and over here it's a capital I. That's something that Unity does. It shows all your variables with capital letters in the inspector. I'm not quite sure why Unity does that, but that's how they do it. And what I'm doing here is I'm not just specifying intensity, I have to do something with that. I'm going to set it equal to something. So the single equal sign means I'm assigning a value to it. So let's assign a value of 5 to it, which would make it really bright. And I can't just say 5, I need to say 5F with the semicolon. The F indicates that it's a floating point value. For now, just understand that a floating point value means it is a decimal. If I save this and then I attach the Flicker script to the point light, I notice that the light has an intensity of 1 right now. But as soon as I press play, I should see that change to a 5. So that's perfect. Our script is working. Let's stop this and bring the code back up. It's always good to make sure that your script is attached correctly and you've got some basic code that is functioning. We don't really want to set the value to 5. What we want to do is give some new properties that we can control this light with. We want it to be constantly changing in intensity. But what do we want it to be? How low can it go? How high can it go? How much does it change each frame? Well, those are all things we want the person who's adding that script to be able to control. So we're going to add a few public variables. Remember, having public class variables will allow the person attaching the script to see those values in the editor and to make changes so that they can have some lights behave one way and other lights behave a different way based on what they set for values. So let's make the first one public. It's going to be of type float, meaning it's a decimal, and the name of it is going to be min intensity, which of course is going to be the lowest value that we want our intensity to ever be. And you can give it a default value here. I'm going to put it at 0.2F. And then we also are going to similarly make a max intensity. Let's set that one to 0.8F. The last variable that we want to have is also a float, a decimal value, and we'll call it flicker rate. And I'm going to set this to 0.05F. This value represents how much the intensity can change each frame. we have to have it really small because of how fast our frame rate is. You may be wondering why we are placing an F after each of the decimals. We know that a float value is a decimal, so why do we need the F? In C#, there's actually two types that could be decimal. There's floating points, which are the float, and there's double precision, which is a double. So if I don't put the F, then it's going to think that I'm trying to use a value of type double. But if I put the F, then it knows that I'm using a decimal that is of type float. Okay, so now what do we want to happen each frame? Let's go down to the update, and I'm going to say float modifier. Here I'm defining a variable named modifier that is of type float. It'll hold a decimal value, but I'm not specifying its accessibility to be private or public. That's because this is a local variable. I'm not defining it up above the methods inside the class as a class variable, which is where we would want to specify public or private access. Here, we already know if it's a local variable, it can only be seen and be used inside this one update method. I couldn't use this variable inside the start method or anywhere else, only inside the update method. And that's the only place we need it, which is why we're defining it here. Now, what is the modifier going to equal? It's going to equal how much we want to modify the current intensity. It's not going to be 0.05. The modifier could be anywhere between negative 0.05 and positive 0.05 because we want the intensity to either go down or up, and it could be any value between negative 0.05 and positive 0.05. It doesn't have to be exactly negative 0.5 or exactly positive 0.05. So we're going to do this by coming up with a random value. So we're going to assign this variable a random value using the random.range method. Random is the object that Unity provides, and the .range is for the method. Now, in this case, there is something inside those parentheses. We need to send it two parameters so that it knows what random value to return to us. All we have to send it is a minimum value and a maximum value. Now, we could, of course, write negative 0.05f, comma 0.05f, and that would give us a value that lies somewhere between those two numbers. However, if the person who attaches this script to a light changes the flicker rate, then these values will be wrong. So we need to use the flicker rate instead. We say -1 times the flicker rate. And for the maximum value, I'm just going to say flicker rate. So now it will use that flicker rate to determine what the min and max could be. And it will return a value and store it inside of the modifier variable. Notice here we're using two operators. One is the assignment operator to set a value, and one is the multiplication operator, the asterisk. We want one more local variable, and that's going to be our new intensity. So we're going to go to float new intensity and set that equal to what? What is our new intensity? Well, it needs to be our current intensity plus the modifier. So the modifier could be positive or negative, but we're going to add that value. Well, what is our current intensity? That was this code here that we talked about previously. I'm going to copy that and paste it here. So now we're setting the new intensity to the current intensity, and we just need to increase by the modifier. Now, if I were to try to run this right now, nothing would happen. We haven't really changed anything. All we've done is set some variables and store some information. So we can't really test it very easily unless we wanted just to do some debug.logs. We could print out the value of the modifier, print out the value of the new intensity, and see it showing up in the console. So let's just add a few more lines of code before we try it out. We're going to do an if statement. This is a conditional statement to check whether something's true or not. The condition goes inside the parentheses, and if that condition ends up being true, whatever follows the parentheses will be executed. If it's not true, it won't be executed. So inside the parentheses, the condition I'm talking about is, what if this new intensity happens to go beyond the max intensity that we wanted? The condition could be written as, if the new intensity is greater than our max intensity, well, we've gone too far. And what should we do? Well, we'll just set it to a different value. We'll set the new intensity to equal the max intensity. Similarly, we do the same thing for the min intensity. We say if the new intensity is less than the min intensity, then we're going to set the new intensity to equal the min intensity. Wonderful. Now we have a new intensity value that should be within my appropriate range. However, we still haven't used that variable. We still haven't done anything besides just setting values. Now we're finally ready to change the intensity. So how do we get to the intensity of the game object? Well, we've done that before. I'm going to copy it from right here and paste it. So we're saying get the component light from the game object this script is attached to, and then get the intensity value, and we're going to use the assignment operator to set it equal to the new intensity. When you look through your code, we're using variables a lot. We've abstracted. That's really good. But here, I'm using a hard-coded 5. So it's going to start off with a really bright intensity. It's also going to start beyond the max intensity. So what number should I put it at? I can't really put any hard-coded number here, because what if the person who attaches this script changes my min intensity or my max intensity, and whatever number I do put here doesn't fall into that range anymore? Well, we need to set this intensity based on those values. I could set it to start out at the min, or I could have it start out at the max, or I could have it start out somewhere in between. I'm going to go with exactly in between. So how do we get the exact value between two other values? We just take the average. I'm going to add them together first, min intensity plus max intensity, and then I'm going to divide by 2. Notice the plus sign is our addition operator, and the / is our division operator. It also follows the same order of operations that you use in mathematics. So in this case, the division would happen before the addition, which is not what we want. So we're going to use parentheses to make sure that the addition happens first, and then we divide by 2. When we run this, we should see the light immediately jump to whatever the average of these is, which is actually 0.5. But it won't be there very long. It'll be at 0.5, and then it will immediately start changing by a very small flicker rate constantly over and over. Let's see if that actually works. I'm going to save this, come back to Unity. If I click on my point light, the script is attached. There are my default values. I'm going to press run. And you see there is kind of a flicker going on there. You can also see over in the inspector that the intensity is constantly changing. It never goes under 0.2 and never goes above 0.8.